All right, Travis, get us started.
All right. Thank you, Adam. Good morning, everyone. I would like to welcome you all to our wrestling committee meeting this year. I'd like to first start off by thanking Adam and Sam for all of their hard work this past season, and everybody else behind the scenes that made wrestling a success. Obviously, numerous challenges were dealt to us along the way. They were constantly changing. And I just want to appreciate Adam's leadership and everyone behind the scenes that made wrestling possible. Because there was a time where we didn't even know if we were going to be able to wrestle, and we didn't know what our state tournament was going to look like. And through a lot of hard work with everyone, we were able to pull off a successful season. It wasn't perfect. It was far from perfect, but it was a success. We were able to crown some champions, and our kids had a tremendous experience. I know that my athletes were grateful, and I don't know how many comments we heard at the state tournament of coaches and athletes that were grateful to have that opportunity. Would like to notice for coaches that are viewing it on the YouTube link, obviously this is a different format than what we're used to. I know coaches are trained and are used to being able to provide instant feedback during our meetings. We know that's not really possible in the format today, but I do want to assure you that there are going to be opportunities for you to provide feedback to the committee over the course of the next year as we look at the items on the agenda. We've got some discussion points that we're going to look at. Today will be a good day of discussion, but you will have an opportunity to provide feedback throughout the next year on where wrestling is headed. With that, I will turn it over to Sam for roll call.
Good morning. I'm just going to go through and just let me know you're here or not. Travis Steiner.
I'm here.
Larry Guile.
Here.
Rodney Padilla.
Here.
Tyler Sini.
Here.
Lamont Adair.
I'm here.
Susan Gerhart.
Here.
Randall Palmer. No. John Horrell. Lou Anderson.
Here.
Matt Brown.
He
And
just
Pat
texted me. He's
DeSmith.
logging on right now.
Okay, thanks, Adam. And
I'm here,
Pat
Sam.
DeSmith. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Sam. At this point, I'll send it over to Adam, and he can give us our welcome and orientation for today.
So really just kind of short and sweet. Thank you guys on the committee for your leadership and guidance over the last year. I know that not just in the sport of wrestling or in athletics, but in our entire way of living, we have all been in dealing with uncharted waters. And I know that's not always easy. So thank you for your patience with us. Thank you for being a group that I could call on and lean on and ask questions of as we tried to navigate the best we could. It certainly hasn't been easy. I can tell you that I am excited to see July, August, September get here when hopefully things are getting closer and closer to what we consider normal. I do believe we can celebrate the fact that we were able to get this season accomplished when we had state and local agencies that were completely against us having our sports, that were doing everything they could to try to put barriers in our way to be able to run this season. And we accomplished it. I know it wasn't anywhere close to normal, but the fact that we have kids walking around with a state championship, we have team champions, and that we accomplished our season when in the beginning it was a no, and then it was simply just to have duels, and we worked our way towards having a state tournament as best we could. I'll consider that a win for this year, and also consider it something we put in our rearview mirror and we move forward to getting back to normalcy. So from my desk in our office, thank you guys. Anybody, the coaches, et cetera, that are watching on there, thank you guys for getting through this year. I'm glad that we gave our kids the opportunity to compete. At the beginning, that's what we said was our focus, was we wanted all kids to compete. They were able to do that. Not as often as we liked or the way we wanted it to happen, but we gave them the chance to compete. And at the end of the day, that's what I guess wrestling in a global pandemic looks like, is we gave them the opportunity. And for that, we'll say it was a win. Really, today. I look forward to some good discussion where we can look at putting this year in the past and move forward with bigger and better things coming in the future. And so I look forward to the discussion and working our way to an even greater place in the near future. So with that, thanks, Travis. Appreciate it, and look forward to the meeting.
Thank you, Adam. All right, at this point, committee members, you've seen the minutes from our meeting in 2019. I would ask if there are any corrections that need to be made, and if not, then a motion to approve those minutes as presented.
I'll move to approve.
I'll second that.
Okay, Sam, did you get that? Tyler, motion to approve, second by Sparky.
Yes, I have both.
Okay. With that, why don't we just signify with a thumbs up in your camera if you're good to approve those?
Got them.
You got them? Okay. We're all good
Thanks,
there.
Susan.
Thank you, Susan. Okay. Our next item of business, 4.0, is our report from our officials. We've got Rob Rivers here to present a report on their behalf. Before I turn it over to Rob, also want to make sure that I thank the officials for their hard work this year. Definitely numerous challenges that were presented to them. And really, we have one of the finest group of officials in the state for any sport, and they represent us well. And we appreciate all of their hard work. And Rob, make sure that all of our officials hear that message, that we're very grateful for the work that they did this year in challenging circumstances with scheduling. I know some officials were working multiple nights a week or multiple different places in a day, and their professionalism, especially at state, never goes unnoticed.
Well, thank you. Guys, I'm going to jump on the bandwagon and give all of you kudos for making this season happen. I know it was tough, and we really appreciate the fact that it did happen. With that, COVID kind of gut punched the Officials Association as well this year. We were down about 30% of our registered members. We were down 40% based on how many chose to actually officiate this season. So it did make it tough on the guys that did officiate. The dual meet type format helped us, but it was a lot of work on especially weeknight days or weeknights, trying to get 3 duels in the night, but we made it through. Regional wise, guys, we assigned 72 officials to regionals this year. Our association will admit that at least 20 of those were not yet of regional tournament quality, but that's what we had to do. Because of that, we gave our crew chiefs the leeway to really be imaginative on when they went to 2-man mechanics, not allowing some guys to blow the whistle and just letting them assist. And I'm really proud of the work those guys did, because as of now, we've only had one formal complaint about regionals that we've had to investigate. When I say formal, that means it comes to CHSAA with detail or it comes to our association with detail. I'm not worried about the social media complaints, but it's the formal complaints. We've had one. So I'm really proud of the work that crew chiefs did, because we did have regionals where a crew chief told an individual, you're no longer blowing the whistle. You're just going to be a second official. We worked through that, trying to keep from having any critical errors that kept individuals from making the state tournament. The state tournament, since we started at the quarters, we proposed that we use 2-man mechanics for the duration of the tournament. I think that went well. I've had a lot of positive comments on that. I myself saw a lot of instances where probably an incorrect call was made, but the officials came together, changed that call, got it right. We eliminated some of those errors that would have stood if we were only using single-man mechanics. So I'm going to say from a personal standpoint, I can't say from the association because I haven't talked to them thoroughly about this yet, but I think it's something we need to consider making a practice from here on out of all matches at the state tournament be run with 2-man mechanics. There's logistics that we would have to work out, but I do think it's the right way to go about doing it. State tournament wise, postseason wise, we are going to put in place a flagrant misconduct protocol. Flagrant misconduct is a serious offense, but more serious is the penalty for flagrant misconduct is disqualification. I'm not concerned about team points, but I'm concerned about individuals being disqualified from an event when the flagrant misconduct may have not been the appropriate call. So we're going to put a protocol in place where that has to be reviewed. At regionals, it would have to be reviewed by the head official. Make sure flagrant misconduct is the appropriate call for that incident. At the state tournament, it would be probably myself or Scott Tarbox as state rules interpreters that would have to come and say, hey, yes, that is, or no, maybe that's just unsportsmanlike conduct. Maybe it's just unnecessary roughness. But the penalty is so severe. We feel like we have to have a protocol in place to make sure it's the correct penalty being applied. So we're going to go forward. Unless someone tells us that absolutely can't happen, we're going to go forward with that. Weigh-ins, guys. Weigh-ins by officials have always been one of our big sticking points with a lot of officials. We would fervently be in favor of officials no longer being required to do weigh-ins during the regular season. Whatever you guys did, that process would have to be up to you guys. I mean, it was pretty imaginative this year. We liked it. We really believe that would help recruitment and retention efforts if we could reduce the time commitment of our officials by 1 to 2 hours per event. It's tough to get across the metro area and get there in time for a weigh-in that's 1 hour prior to start of the event without missing a lot of work. So we really think it would help recruitment and retention. I think it's something that we really need to consider. And I know when I go back east to officiate, officials don't touch weigh-ins back there. So we would have to work through that. One thing we'd have to work through is shave and nails was not policed well this year. We kind of let that go just because we all wanted to have a season. It would have to be done better in the future. The last thing I want to talk about, and I'll give kudos. I mean, our guys were very happy to be part of the first CHSAA sanctioned girls state tournament. It's an honor to be a part of that. With that, we're going to go to the stance that we're no longer babying this along. The girls are going to have to follow the rules. And the one rule we're really having a problem with is the wording that was added to the rule book this year that says a female contestant must wear an undergarment that completely covers their breasts and minimizes the risk of exposure. That is not happening. A sports bra underneath a regularly cut singlet most of the time is not sufficient. It is not sufficient. I didn't do one event this year with female competitors where I didn't have to talk to a coach. We have got to get that. We've got to get that in compliance with the rules. It's a serious issue, and officials are really getting fed up with having to deal with it. We got to minimize the risk of exposure. I know of one incident where we actually had that occur where there was exposure. That's tough on an official. So we've got to get that in place. We've kind of babied through all this, trying to make it happen. Well, it's happened, and now we got to get on board with those rules. That's truthfully all I've got for you guys. I mean, we're happy a season occurred. I think we can learn from this season. I think we can benefit from what happened this season and be better in the future. Two-man mechanics at the state tournament is something I really believe should happen. But that's all up to you guys. You're the wrestling committee. You drive how this is run. So you have to buy off on that and tell us to go forward with that. So any questions of me? All right. Thanks for the opportunity to talk to you guys.
Thanks, Rob.
You bet.
Appreciate that, Rob.
Yeah.
Before we move on to the committee members, anything there out of Rob's report that you would like to touch base on before we move on? Obviously, we would have some time before next season to see if we want to institute any of these changes, but if there's something that's on your mind right now, please feel free.
I will say I like the idea of the two-man mechanics at state. If they're willing to do that, I see no reason why we wouldn't move forward with that piece as soon as possible. I think that's a great idea. I know they were using it in certain situations, but to be able to go through the whole tournament and do that, if they're willing to do that, I certainly don't see any reason why we would stand in the way of them volunteering to put more people on the mat to help out.
Yeah, and I'll piggyback off Adam. I don't see any reason not to move forward with the coaches weigh-in for regular season either. If that's something that'll create some retention and some help for those guys, I mean, I would be for it. And I think our season ran pretty smooth, despite being a brand new thing that coaches weren't real aware of. It still went well. So we could just have some training on how to conduct that weigh-in, and get it done without the official being there, I think that'd be good.
Completely agree, Tyler. Coaches did a great job with that this year, so I think we could definitely move forward with that.
I got here late, so I don't know if you talked about it or not, but on that weigh-in, I thought that was one nice thing. Is there any talk on video and weigh-ins and doing it at home, or is everybody gonna move back to on-site weigh-ins? I mean, it helped us with travel time. If we could weigh in at home, then you don't have to leave. You don't have to leave as early, but I missed out if you guys have discussed that at all.
Yeah, I'd kind of like to piggyback that. If you have an opportunity to do that, I don't know whether we can do that or not, but if you can have administrators sign off on those weigh-ins, I mean, there's a lot of options, but that's something that I agree with Matt. We should, at least consider.
Yeah, I'd be fine with just an administrative signature. You don't have to video it or anything. Just have your administrator sign off, and then, yeah, you don't need to be somewhere an hour prior.
Are there concerns about a school being able to do weigh-ins at 3 o'clock before they leave, and then the other school doesn't conduct them until 5 o'clock, and recovery time for athletes or those kinds of things? Do we need to establish that they'd be conducted at the same time as they are currently, even if they're not in the same location? Are there concerns there?
I don't know if there's concerns. I definitely think there should be verbiage stating when the weigh-in should take place, so you're kind of on an equal playing field, but then it's just going to fall to the efficacy of the coaches, right, to follow up on that. But that's one of those things that'll come back and bite you at the regional and state tournament when it becomes an official weigh-in. And if your kid hasn't done it all year, you run the risk of them not being prepared. So I think our coaches in this state will do a good job with it. But I like, Travis, what you're saying. I think there needs to be some verbiage of your weigh-in will take place at 4 and the wrestling duel will start at 5:30 for JV, whatever it is, but yeah, definitely some guidelines as far as how to conduct it.
Would you eliminate, so since it's an administrative weigh-in, you would eliminate kids weighing in and then randomly selecting 3 kids to weigh in at that official site? I was only at one quad where a team had 4 kids over when they did the random. So I guess an administrator in the weigh-in area at your school would probably eliminate that.
Yeah, I would think if you're weighing in on site, you would just go to a full team weigh-in. So my AD or principal would come down and weigh in my entire crew, and then we
Correct.
would get the bus and go.
So weigh-ins would take place a little earlier and it would give kids better time to recuperate. But yeah, if you were leaving, you probably weigh in at 3, and that would mean the home team would probably weigh in at 3 as well.
Yeah.
The only issue I see with that would be your Saturday tournaments. You're going to ask your AD to come up to the school at 6 a.m. to do a weigh-in if you're leaving to go to a 8 a.m. tournament somewhere.
For Ray, that's going to be 4 a.m.
Right.
And I don't have a problem asking them to do that either.
I'm sure you don't.
I don't know that having an administrator sign off would necessarily have to be a sticking point. Again, we do a lot of things that are on the honor system throughout our state and throughout our sports. So asking coaches to do that on the honor system too, maybe have, multiple adults in the room, or if we go to a video scenario or something like that, I think we could come up with something. Another thing to think about is if there are district teams, maybe not all those kids are at one location at the same time. If you have homeschooled students that have to come in, if you're asking them to show up at 4 for weigh-ins for your school, and then, the match isn't until 6:30 or so, those are things to consider. I don't know, again, if they're sticking points or not, but things we would probably want to work through to think through some of those as well.
And the other piece, I know we've got the actual weigh-in itself covered, but skin checks. we're just going to be relying on a coach who's allowed the kid to wrestle all week in the wrestling room to sign off on a skin check. Do we have any liability pieces there that we need to come up with a different solution other than an AD who may not know anything about a skin check signing off on a skin check?
Another question, Adam, probably NFHS, is there anything ruling from them on how we have to conduct weigh-ins? Does that become an issue at all?
Let me check on, I don't believe so, but I'll double check that, and I can do that while our presenter comes on 11. I can get that answer. I'll shoot our guys in NFHS a text right now to confirm that. And then the other piece too would be your overnight weigh-ins. You know, depending on where you're traveling from or traveling to, if you're wanting to do it at the home site, is that a weigh-in on Friday before I come travel overnight to stay somewhere to wrestle on Saturday?
If it's, if everybody has the opportunity to do it, I don't see a problem with it, but the National Federation deal, I know Kansas did on at-home weigh-ins for forever, and they've gone to on-site weigh-ins because if you didn't follow the National Federation rule on the weigh-in deal, then they don't allow. I think they take your state's opportunity away to vote on the National Federation rule changes. But you'll have to ask them for sure.
And maybe this is just me. I see an opportunity here to give some flexibility to teams on our weekday duels. I kind of feel like in a tournament, I don't know that if that flexibility is needed or not. I mean, you're all going to the same site. It's going to be an early morning start. Maybe that stays the same. Maybe tournaments, you all still go weigh in on site there, and it's standardized. You've got more teams that, in play there. But I think potentially on a duel or a try, you could work something out with those schools to have a common time that you do your weigh in, and you're all on equal footing there, and it's maybe more convenient for schools and officials. But again, even on Saturdays or on tournaments, I think coaches could handle that and not necessarily have to have officials there early to conduct those weigh-ins.
Yeah, I think that was the key, is if we have our officials there 2 hours before on a tournament, that really lengthens their days. And if we can limit those, like Rob was saying, that would be the advantage of having people do weigh-ins on site, even at tournaments.
The NFHS verbiage says the referee or other authorized person shall supervise the weigh-in. So if we're going to authorize a school administrator, then that would be the authorized person to supervise the weigh-in.
You go to the Reno Tournament of Champions, coaches usually do the weigh-ins in the morning as well on Saturday.
Yeah, regionals ran smooth too, with just doing the coaches and the one official being there, but our coaches and our administrators ran our weigh-ins at regionals, and it went really well. So I think something where you do your honor system for your duels and then your Saturday weigh-in where everybody comes on site and you don't necessarily need all your officials there, maybe one, or you just have your administrator be the authority. And so Saturday tournaments, you're on site with everybody and everybody gets checked and has some accountability, and duels are honor system.
I think that's a good compromise that we could put together a plan that I can kind of vet that out and send some wording to you guys and see if that's something we want to do. And if the verbiage is what we like, we can say that duels are away at home with an admin sign off, and then your tournaments are away in day of with the site administrator signing off, overseeing all weigh-ins there on the tournaments.
If we do that on duels and stuff, I don't know what everybody else thinks, but like if we have a Thursday duel, if both teams weigh in at home, why not let them weigh in the morning? Kids can eat breakfast and then go to school and not have to sit in school all day being miserable. And I don't know what the best case scenario is there, but I think if you let them weigh in at 7:30 in the morning and they can eat and go to school and And because they're going to have to make weight on Saturday, so nobody's going to be ballooning up anyway. But, and then also on the skin check deal, I don't know if Rob mentioned it before I got on, but are the referees, can they not, since they got
through the interruption?
Yep.
Oh, no, you're good. I think that was a fire drill. I think somebody's getting ready to jump on.
Oh, okay. Do they not want to do skin checks since we're weighing in singlets? I mean, if the kids all just line up right there, they could hammer through skin checks pretty quick. That would, because you're going to have people that don't have a clue about skin checks doing weigh-ins. I don't know if that's something they want to take away.
And that could be something we put in the verbiage is the officials just show up and before the first match, they do a skin check. Everybody runs through real quick and we're good to go.
Yeah, you could do the officials always have that talk with your team prior. So, I mean, you want to do a quick run through and skin check or something for that? I don't know.
Or you could give me the officials don't have to show up so early to do the official weigh-ins. They just have to show up and do the skin check, the nail and shaving check. So it can be a quick process and move on.
Yeah, I think that would be good.
I don't need to cut my nails an hour before, but I can cut them, 5 minutes before I wrestle kind of thing. So if an official's there, I can do that real quickly. We can move on and do that piece.
I think that's fair.
And as far as the weighing in the morning, I mean, in my mind, if it's a mutual consent between those that are showing up for that duel, I don't see an issue there. But I would defer to the group. But I think if it's something the two schools that are going to be dueling each other that night, say we're going to weigh in at 7 so our kids don't starve all day. In my mind, that doesn't make a difference to me and where I stand, but leave that to the group.
Before we get too much into that, I will let you know we do have track coming online at 11. So we've got about 2 minutes maybe to wrap this conversation up, and we can give Adam some direction, and then we can. I know they have a tight schedule today, so we do want to respect their time. And I apologize for the intercom in the background. That will be a constant theme here for a little bit as we get into lunch. Do we want to just charge Adam with putting some verbiage together and getting that out to us, and we can take a look at all those pieces, and we can work on vetting something out before the season starts next year?
Yeah.
Yes.
I do fully agree. I think looking into potentially a morning weigh-in for those duels would be good. I know from the school side of things, having a kid that's got some food in their belly and able to focus for 8 hours in school before they go wrestle that night could be very helpful to that student in a lot of ways. So I would be interested to see if that's a piece we could add in as well. I think that's just in the overall best interest of the kids.
Yeah, I like that as well. I'd be a fan of that. Anything that helps our sport run a little smoother and easier for these kids would be good.
Okay, I'll work on putting that together. Essentially, we're going to look at officials to do the skin, shave, and nails check wherever they are at, whether it's a duel or a tournament. We'll look at some type of verbiage around a mutual consent for weigh-in time for duels, and then weigh-ins will be done at the home site, and then for tournaments, so anything above 4 teams would all be done on site. The school admin would be the one that would be overseeing those weigh-ins at tournaments. Okay, I will wordsmith that together. I see Shane is here with track wrestling right now, so I'm going to let him into our meeting. And really, I guess we can kind of, before I let him in, I'll kind of lead with this. What we're looking at doing here is our guys with track wrestling have capabilities for seeding. The capabilities that they have would enable us to have our entire state tournament seeded as soon as regionals are finished. So by, let's call it 11:59 Saturday night, you could have your state brackets out that are done. It is a very labor intensive process right now with how we do things. So I just want them to go through, show you some of the things that they can do. And the overall idea here is we're the last sport that is currently using the system that we use with regionals and how we do things. And it's probably time to begin discussions on other options. And so with them being partners of ours that basically run our season for us. We figured we would start with them on what tools they have and then what the limitations are there. And then we can go through and begin those discussions. Is that something that we want to begin to explore? So let me go ahead and let in. We're going to have Shane and Eve coming on. Hi, Shane and Eve. Thanks for coming on.
Hello.
I just kind of gave everybody a real quick 30-second what the heck you're doing here kind of chat. And so with that, Shane and Eve, I'm going to turn it over to you guys to kind of just share with us what track wrestling has in your capabilities of potentially looking at seeding our state tournament and some ideas that we can mull over in the coming weeks and months.
Yeah, no, that sounds great. Thanks, Adam. I think if you don't mind, I can share my screen. I think, and maybe I don't have the ability.
You should be able to now.
Share screen. There we go. Find the right one. Okay, so I think, are you guys seeing, this is the back end, this is the admin side of your state championships from this year. Is that what you're seeing?
Yep.
Perfect. So, so this is the actual tournament. So I'm going to be careful not to do too much and break anything while I try to explain. So essentially, our seed system that we can use in track wrestling pulls data from the OPC. As you guys know, or folks know, OPC is where all those results are entered. So teams are entering results through the year. Track wrestling has all of those, and we can actually point our seed system at those results. And the two, I guess, kind of big things from the current season are we can look at head-to-head and common opponent. And that's different than this head-to-head that sometimes you see and hear in your qualifying events, right? Where coaches go in after a certain window and they say, I beat this person, they beat us. And that's all manual and you're relying on coaches entering that. This is actually pulling directly from those results that are entered. So if results entered, we can point at it, again, head-to-head or common opponent. The other thing, and we can use a lot of different data points in this. We can look at record. We could look at a certain record. You could look at a record, let's say in your division or in your conference. There's lots of different things to look at. And then what we can also do is point at events that have run on track wrestling and look at placement from those. So last year's state tournament, this year's region tournaments, all of those things we can point at. And again, with the click of a button, that data gets pulled and coaches don't have to enter any of it. So you're not missing things. Everything is in there and ready to go. So I can show you an example here. And again, what we have in here now in terms of criteria, A, what the criteria are, and B, what the order isn't set in stone. This was just kind of an example. Actually, I think Adam, you and I even looked at this maybe a year ago just to kind of preview it. So, but all of this is customizable for sure, whatever you guys want to do. So I just picked a weight, and you'll notice for those of you that aren't familiar with the back end, these criteria that are in here, we can adjust on this side too. So right now, qualifying place gets listed first, and that's how, when you guys are seeding currently, you get your 4 champs at the front, your 4 seconds. But again, if we moved this criteria down, we could sort it by winning percentage or wins, whatever you wanted to. Here, excuse me, here are the 2 that are new and that are related to our discussion today. Your seed and your seed points. Excuse me. And what the system does is it takes all the wrestlers in a weight class, in this case 8, and it compares each of them to the other 7. So Adam and I get compared to one another. It runs through the criteria. He gets a point or I get a point for that criteria. And then it goes through and does that same thing with all 7 opponents. And what I'll do first is we can check mark all of them. And then we click this button that says view seed report. And this opens this report, which basically says, Kieran from Grand Junction, when we compared Kieran to the other seven wrestlers, Kieran won every single one of those. And because he won every single one of those comparisons, our system's putting him as the 1 seed. Now, I will point out that you can go back at any point and still move these wrestlers like you would any other time. Again, I'm going to try to not move things around here too much, just to not mess with this. Because brackets are built, I don't think I can hurt too much, but I've said that before and hurt plenty, so I want to be careful. But you could always move those. So think of this as, well, you could think of it as a pre-seed because that's what it is. There are some states that this is the letter of the law and they use it and go with it. That's completely up to you. That certainly is not a track wrestling decision. But this, and then what we can do then in this report, we can click on any of these wrestlers and we can see how Kieran got these 7 points. Here's probably a good example right here. When we compared Daniel to Kieran, there were no head-to-heads, otherwise we'd see values in this row. On common opponents, they were 2-0, and so they tied there. So again, we're just moving down the list of criteria. Last year's state tournament, they were both champions. This year, they were both qualifiers. So again, we're just tied. These two, I'm guessing these are two pretty good wrestlers. I picked them randomly, but these guys both are moving down. So then finally we get to varsity record, which is the next in the order of the criteria. 9-0 versus 13-0. Kieran gets that point. He wins that comparison. If you had something in there, I'm guessing they were both regional champs too, but we could also add something like that in there as well. The one thing, I'll point this out right away, the one thing that the system can't do automatically is point back to events outside of last year. That information can get entered manually by coaches on their rosters. Like you could take the whole year and do that. So if you were in the OPC, which I don't have open, you can click on a wrestler and we could make those fields editable. So let's say you had a kid that won the state tournament, 2 years ago. That's the sort of information, or your state office could do that sort of thing. There's lots of ways to kind of tackle that. And there are some states that do that. It's just our system can only point 1 season behind, if that makes sense.
So we do have an option to be able to get that 3 years worth of data. It just would be a manual entry on some form or fashion as opposed to an auto pull.
Yeah, that's correct. So if you were in the OPC and you click on any of your wrestlers, you'll see a criteria. I think it says criteria values. We could add 2 years ago state tournament, 3 years ago state tournament place, and then coaches could enter that. And most of those values we lock, so coaches can't change them. We want to pull those automatically, but we can open those up for those instances.
Okay.
If we want to see, for instance, on these common opponents who they were, you can actually see them. System's pulling match data there. Looks like, yeah, they each had 2 wins over the same wrestler. We can also, in the common opponent and head-to-head, we can look at various ways to make those comparisons. We can use straight record. It's a 1-0 or 2-0 or 1-1. We can use activity points. We can use, let's say in a common opponent, Adam pinned a guy, I only majored him, Adam would get that comparison. So all those things are up to you guys. We can customize a lot of that. And again, it's as simple as kind of clicking buttons here, and you can do that for any of these wrestlers. So again, that's probably a good comparison of 2 really, really good kids. If you look down, showing these, state place winner, qualifier, all that good stuff, and you just run through that. If in the end we get through, let's say back on this comparison, yeah, these are the 2. Let's say they were both 9-0. They would actually split that point. If you get to a point where you can't break a tie, they're absolutely tied in every criteria that we've established ahead of time, then those 2 wrestlers split it. So it's possible to have a tie. It's pretty rare, but it's possible to have a tie there. And then all we do then, and I did one of these, I think I did maybe 26. Nope, 32. Oh, we'll go back to 45. All you do then as the event admin, so you guys would come in on that Sunday or whenever you're doing this, and then all we have to do, and this isn't going to hurt anything, so I'm going to fetch this criteria. and it pulls that data, and then it's showing you now these same values that we looked at before. Here's Kieran, who in your seating was the 3 track wrestling seating based on what we have right now in the system. Again, this is all rough and kind of guessed at just a little bit. He would have won, as we know, he won all those comparisons. He would have been the 1 seed based on this. So again, in this weight class. Daniel would have been the 2. Jason would have been the 3. Now you'll notice they're not moving on this page, and that's because I have these sorted towards the bottom so we don't mess anything up. In the real world, if you're using this, we would put seed at 1, seed points at 2, and it would actually adjust these wrestlers on this page. So if you didn't want to argue or discuss it and you felt comfortable, not saying that this has to be the way you go, but it could be as simple as clicking this fetch button and then building the bracket, and you got it done. And that would take less than 17 hours, I believe. I'm confident there. So I can open it up to questions. That's kind of a quick version. I guess I want to make sure that we're clear that when we look at the criteria, which again, we can see in the seed report, if that opens, as we look at these criteria, here's the order we have currently. Head-to-head, common, which is almost always, most states do that. They look at head-to-head and common almost, not that you have to, but almost always. State place, state qualifier, and then current season record. But that can be adjusted and customized any way that you'd like. So I'll pause there if anybody has any questions or things they'd like to ask.
Adam already asked this, but I just wanted to clarify. We would have to do a manual entry Sunday morning if we wanted to pull previous seasons. So for Daniels, he was the state champion as a freshman and a sophomore, but it's not pulling that, right?
Yeah, but what we would do is this, not the morning of. So you're, let's say I'm a coach. Let me go in the OPC, and this is going to look a little different than what you guys see, but I'll get there. And what team was Daniel from?
Pomona.
Oh, no.
And actually, yeah, I'm not going to be able to show you a great example here, but each coach is on this page, right? They're entering their schedule, checking results, doing stats, whatever they're doing here. If they go to the roster page, and I take Daniel, this was him, correct? I click on Daniel. This is already here. You guys just don't use it or probably don't pay attention to it. Each coach can go here. They'd see this. Most of these, I can edit these right now just with my permissions. Most of these would be locked, but we could open up and we could add let's say it's this year, we could add an 18-19 high school state place where a coach could go in and add that at any point throughout the season and update it. So they would just switch it there, save it, and then that's attached to that wrestler. So now when we go to this report, we would see that other criteria, we would add it, and you would see that criteria. And then because that coach went and added him as a first, you're saying he won it that year, you could use that data as well. So to answer the question, it wouldn't have to be on that Sunday morning. We wouldn't want it to be, honestly. They'd have the entire season to enter that information.
Yeah.
Oh, that's huge. That could also be a governing body administrator or somebody they delegate with that level of permission. Also, it doesn't necessarily have to be a coach.
Yeah, that's correct. So in theory, yeah, that's a good point, Eve. Coaches could do that. We could open it up. If you didn't want that, this would come from Adam's office. If you didn't want that opened up for folks, and we can do that on a criteria by criteria basis too. So they couldn't go in and move last year's place or whether they're qualifier, but the previous years you could also set that up. So somebody like Adam or somebody in his office, we generate a report and they would go through and plug away and add those things in too. But one way or another, we would kind of manually set this criteria. But then once we get here, the system would see it and we'd be able to use it to seed.
So with that new criteria that you just entered, would that have changed and put Daniel back to number 1 as opposed to, you said, the number 3 kid here, would that have changed that seating?
Well, probably. I guess I don't. You guys would know these guys better than me, but if Kieran wasn't a returning champ, and that was a criteria ahead of some of this other stuff, then yeah, probably I would imagine that would have changed that.
Probably changed. So if one had 3 titles and one had 2, that could change the seating to make it true.
Yeah, exactly. If that, and I believe that's what you guys are doing. You're trying to look at that historical data back several years. We would just need to put it in order. So right now, head common. If you didn't want to use that, you wouldn't have to either. But let's say it was high school state place or returning place winner, 18-19 place winner, 17-18 place winner. It would just kind of run down those criteria just like they did. So yeah, I would imagine if you used, yeah, absolutely. If you used that criteria for returning champion from previous years and one was and one wasn't, it would absolutely change that comparison. Yeah.
And then for our guys, this is all stuff that we could also put in and could be used for regional seating too, potentially, because we could have it where this is all entered before regionals. So it's all done.
Yep.
Coaches have to enter it, even if it's not used for regionals, that's done prior to regionals. So when the regionals are finished, all the information's there so that it can go through and run the seeds quickly.
So just for clarity, Adam, if we went to something like this, we'd have to have coaches agree or committee agree that we no longer care about regional placing at that point, correct? Because this is going to seed it regardless of how you placed at regionals, or is this just breaking up your regional placements?
Shane, I believe, isn't one of the options we could put on there that you are a qualifying place first, and that's, I'll let Shane, I'll kind of defer to Shane on this one, but I think we could still place the winners and then from there seed it. But again, this is up to us and how we want to do that, and what reward do we want to give somebody for winning a regional. That's all up for discussion amongst the committee here.
Okay.
Yeah, and to explain, I guess from our side, like how you could do it. So if you notice this, there are some states that do this. They look at the qualifying place first, and then they'll seed these 4 and then work out their way on down. The other thing you could do is rather than, and it really depends on how deep you're seeding. How deep do you seed now? Do you seed everyone?
No, we seed the top 4 only right now. And then it's no longer seeded at that point. It is designed to keep regional opponents away from each other on the bracket.
Yeah.
But it's no longer seeded.
Yeah, and here's another option. So is there some sort of formula that you place them in, like A1 versus C4 or something like that?
Yes, essentially. It's a little more long and convoluted than that, but yes.
Yeah, I gotcha. No, we work with some states that do that too. As a matter of fact, Michigan, we have still coming up, and they do something like this. They seed just their placement, their champions. And then let's say it goes this way. He's 1, 2, 3, 4, like it sits. And then we can actually build on a formula that says, so let's say that formula, and this one's pretty simple, probably. It's going to be something like A1 versus D4, B2 versus C3 or whatever. I'm trying to mess that up. But if we have that set up ahead of time, we can actually build and call this one A, this one B, this one C, this one D, and you can actually drive how that formula looks based on these 4 champs. So rather than making it more random, we can seed a number of wrestlers and then build on a formula. If that's just another option, I'm just saying that's a potential, thing that we could do for you.
And that's going to be a philosophical discussion that we need to have as a committee. If we were to move to something like this, is are we more interested in a true seeded bracket, or are we more interested in adjusting where regions go? And that's the philosophical question that has to be answered.
Yep.
Because right now you can't do both, and that's what we've been struggling with. And so that's the deeper discussion we need to have, is where do we land, and then we can adjust in the system based on where we land.
Yeah, I'm confident that we could help with either method there. using.
So philosophically, what state do any of the states that you work with right now go straight through with criterial seeding as opposed to some criteria and then some formula? Are there any states that go strictly by criteria 1 through 16?
Yeah, so a couple. Iowa for sure. Iowa seeds 1 through 8, I believe, and then random draw the rest. Whatever happens there. This year's a little different because a lot of brackets are smaller. You guys ran into that too, right? So it's a little bit different in this year. Minnesota does something like that. I think actually Minnesota might seed all 16. There are several. It's more common to seed using this system at the qualifying level. And then a lot of states will use formulas in state tournaments. And we're getting more and more that are seeding because they're getting pushback on the formulas not always being fair, right? Like you wrestle all those matches, we have all this data, why not seed it? I don't know. This is my opinion. I think it's scary to seed because you don't want to be wrong, right? And this is a way for at least to get to a starting point where people aren't doing it. You're strictly looking at data, and then you can blame track wrestling. We get that a lot. We're okay with that. So, but again, and other states will do kind of a combo, right, where they'll seed their champions. This is a good example. Let's say there were 4 champs here. They'll seed those and then they'll draw the rest. Let's say it's 16 like you guys would have traditionally. And they'll draw the rest in on formula. So lots of ways to do it.
Adam, this is a philosophical question regarding the qualifying tournament. So there are times when you have kids that place 5th and 6th that don't get any credit in the regional qualifying criteria. I would venture to put out that it would be a good idea to give those kids credit for a future discussion, but 5th and 6th should be involved in some kind of criteria, even if it's minimal, but at least that would separate kids who had never placed in regionals as opposed to kids that did, and now their body of work is different the next year. And it gives them the same kind of elevation as somebody who was 1 through 4, or according to what's written here, state qualifier. So that's just a discussion point for the future.
Yeah, and in terms of the criteria, we like I said before, we can customize those in almost any way. So if you're looking at like region place, let's say you're going to use that, you could do 1 through 4. We could do 1 through 6. If you're placing deeper, we could look at all of those. So, or you can do yes or no's, right? Were you a state qualifier last year, not a state qualifier? There's some states that do, if you don't wrestle back for 3rd, they'll count 2nd and 3rd as kind of the same value, right? Because those, if it's not a true wrestle back. So lots of ways to do this. And we would just need direction from you guys, and we'll build it out to work however you might want it to.
Okay, any other questions from the group for these guys, just as they kind of present what some future options may look like?
Gentlemen, anything else, or ladies that we have? Do we have any questions?
I don't think so. It sounds like they can do pretty much anything we need them to. So yeah, good system. We just it sounds like it's kind of in our lap to figure out what kind of criteria we want to use to seed that state tournament.
Yeah, I'll point out too, we don't like a lot of things. We don't charge anything for this too, right? So it's free. There's that won't have to be part of the discussion. There's no charge for it. So Adam's smiling. He likes that.
Yeah. I'm glad you don't charge by the email, because we'd be going broke how many times I reached out to you trying to build these brackets for this hybrid year we created.
We're considering it. We'll see. This has been a unique year for all of us, for sure. Well, okay. Well, Adam, I mean, if you want us to stick around, we're happy to. Otherwise, I mean, you know how to get a hold of us too. We're happy to answer any questions you guys might have.
Yeah, I think you gave us some good information to chew on. I'm over the coming days and weeks, we'll be in touch and kind of see what it looks like from here.
All right, that sounds good. I'll try and figure out how to close out of here, and we will talk soon.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it.
Yep, thank you.
Shane. We appreciate your time.
Absolutely. Thanks, guys. Good luck.
So for us, for our meeting, as Shane is exiting, I think where our discussion heads then is, I mean, I know we have this conversation a lot, is what do we want our state seating to look like? What do we want our regional seating to look like? Is it time to look at how we're doing that process? I would wholeheartedly agree. We need to get track wrestling on board, and we need their help in getting our tournament seated. I think we need to utilize that tool more. How we do that and how we want to structure it definitely is up for conversation. And again, I don't think there's anything we have to decide today, but today is a great avenue for us to discuss. And if we need to get more information or we need to talk to the rest of the state, we need to get that ball rolling on what do we want to do. And at that, I would, again, I think it comes back to the philosophical discussion of, do we want more of a true seeded tournament, regionals or state, or are we okay with the system we have in place where we honor those regions? We have changed our regional format in the past few years, where now we are distributing those teams based on returning state points. So we have a process in place where we're trying to balance regionals a little bit more. So we have moved teams out of their traditional geographical region. And I believe that's where some of that original format came from, is if you had a stronger region than another one, you didn't want your kids matching up right away again in the state tournament. And I believe that's where part of that philosophy comes from. Now that we've switched that philosophy with how we determine our regions, maybe it's time we update our seating as well. And maybe that's not as big of a piece now, because we've spread the strength of teams throughout the state, and they're not just located in potentially one area. So those are questions to think about and to discuss. And at that, I'll turn it over for anyone that has thoughts or comments for the group.
I would just say from my chair in the last 2 years, I've heard from both sides where we need to protect regions and we need to seed the whole thing. And it sounds like track may have an answer that's right down the middle, where we can seed part of it and then draw in the rest. So I think there's options for us to be able to come together and come up with what we think is best for Colorado high school wrestling. And it sounds like they have the tools to be able to do something like that. The hardest part of the work is going to be getting everyone to agree on what that process is. But it does sound like we have a partner that can make that work for us.
I think it's probably a no-brainer to use them. I mean, we could give them the criteria and they can do it exactly how we're doing it now, and we wouldn't have to have you guys making the brackets for however many hours it takes. They could just do it as quickly as it'll kick them out. My concern is like regional seedings. Just if you have an injured kid or a kid that was ineligible and his record's bad, but everybody in the region knows that, hey, this kid's a quality kid, you have to be able at some point to get the coaches together to get that kid seated in the right spot by a consensus of coaches. And that's the one thing I don't like about just kicking it over to track. And else maybe there's a way to put something in there where we could change that. It doesn't happen all the time, but every year I'll bet you half the region's got some scenario where there's a kid that doesn't have the matches for whatever reason. I don't know what everybody else's thoughts are on that.
When you still had your coaches meeting there at the regional level to go and make those minor adjustments as needed. I think that's something that's still important there. And we can add different criteria to seeding regionals if we want to. I think we've got, if the data is out there, they can build a system that can help us do that, and then coaches can still have that meeting if they want. So I think regionals, I think we can find a way to adjust and make regionals work. This really just be do we want to, again, it goes back to the philosophical question. Are we more interested in protecting regions or getting the bracket seeded based on however many data points we want to put in there? Kind of Shane made it sound like we can put as many data points as we want to try to seed something. Are we more interested in true seeding? Are we more interested in protecting regions, or are we more interested in a hybrid situation where we can protect 1 through 4 or 1 through 8 and then seed 9 through 16 accordingly? Those are all options to us that we can spend some time discussing and looking at and seeing what's best for Colorado.
Yeah, I do like the idea of, and I'll just kind of start opening it up here. I don't protect the region, but I do like the idea of giving incentive to go and win your regional tournament, right? So I don't like seeing the forfeits or I'm going to step out because I'm already qualified and so I'm good. So I think that at least we seed that 1 through 4, or you get your regional champions or 1 through 4, and then 5 through 16 can be truly seeded out. I would be in favor of something like that, but again, eager to hear from other people as well.
Well, I favor the true seeding as well. But I think if you're going to seed 1 through 4, you may have to go farther than that. I mean, and because you've seen those regions that have 4 really quality kids, and usually that's a pretty good match between the 4th place regional kid and a regional champion. So you still may want to separate some of those kids. So I like I guess I'm saying I like the true seeding, but I might, go farther than 4.
Does the committee need more information from anybody? Do we need to hear some more information from track? Do you need time to go talk with, the people that you represent to get information? Or do we feel like we're okay with how things are and are okay proceeding? Again, we're not making any decisions today, but as far as driving this discussion, is there certain piece of information you would like to see?
I'd like to take like a possible 3 scenarios, maybe like leave it where it is, regional champions, true seeding, regardless of regional, and put it maybe in a survey and send it out and see if we can't just get some data back from coaches on what they like. And that would be something I would be more than happy to get out, maybe push it over to Tim Yount and have him run it out to some coaches and just see what people are leaning towards.
I think you need some examples, so 3 or 4 scenarios, and then they can see this, maybe use a group of kids, and then they can see how it would play out with this criteria 2, criteria 3, criteria 4, how it would actually impact, a body of work as opposed to protecting regionals, that kind of stuff.
I think, are we all in agreement that we probably need to move on from what we currently do? I think Travis hit the nail on the head when we waterfall the regionals now. There is no real point to trying to separate the regions because the regions are already being separated by what we do with the waterfall. So we don't need to separate those at state. Again, that logic was brought in a long time ago when the 4A South region had the top 10 teams in it and you had returning state champions that didn't qualify the next year. I understand that logic, but we don't do that anymore. So are we good with not having that as an option, moving on to more of a true seeded state tournament?
And to that point, real quick, we also have on our agenda coming up how we're going to build those waterfalls, and if we want to adjust those from 8 to 12, or how we want to do that to where we can really get even more separation amongst our regions. So that's something that we can discuss as well. Just it's to come on the meeting, but it's something that tag teams off of what you just said. We can go in and further that even more if that's something we desire to a certain extent.
Adam, is there anything else you need from us on the topic right now, or more direction?
I think what I'll do is I'll work with Tyler. We can see if we can get something out to coaches and get some feedback on what we're looking like. What we could do at that point is call a committee back together. As far as the committee report, I think what we'll put in there is the committee's going to explore different options by surveying our coaches across the state on what those different scenarios, and we can decide if that's a 3-question or 4-question survey, et cetera. But as is seeding 1 through 16 or some form of hybrid there within, we can get that out to people and get feedback from the coaches that are going to be living it, so they had a voice in what it is we're trying to accomplish. At the end of the day, we want to get the best kids going against the right kids, so we have the best tournament we can. And hopefully this is just seen as another tool to help us get that accomplished.
Can track can they grab a weight from like the state tournament and we give them like 3 different criterias and they run it for us, like one bracket, just to see what it does to it?
Yes, I think they could. The question is going to be, do they have all the data that we would actually want to put into our seeding criteria? Because they, as we just saw, they don't have 2 or 3 years worth of state champion information there. So we could it be done? Yes, it's going to take an amount of time and some work to be able to get, if we want to look at exactly what it would look like on our ends, it's going to take some effort on their part and our part to be able to give them that information. And then we still got to come together and agree on what are those data points we want them to use.
Yeah.
So they could run a scenario, but it may not be all the data points that we want to have in the scenario. So I hate to make a decision based on a scenario they present to us, but it's not actually a true representation of what we would be using because it's missing data point X, Y, and Z.
Right. I understand that. I was just trying to get a good visual of what this does to brackets, depending on what you pick.
Okay, well, I'll get with you, Tyler, after this, and we'll see if we can't get something out there here in the next couple of days, and at least kind of get people talking about it.
Perfect.
All right. Thanks, Adam, for getting track on the call today and giving us those options. And I think the committee definitely wants to support having them be a bigger role in seeding the tournaments and taking some of that work off of the seeding committee. I think any way to make that more efficient and expedited is greatly needed. With that, we'll move on to item 7.0, the regional. I know that we want to talk about uniformity a little bit across the regions. That's something we've been trying to tighten up the last few years, and I think we have made progress on that. And I know we still have some work to do there. And along with that, talk about our returning points and our distribution of teams, and then our girls regions. So I'll let Adam jump back in here and give you some feedback and some information on what he's been working on.
So on the uniformity piece, this year, while I know it was a very unique year, we were able to have all of our regions have the same format and the same starting time. I heard from multiple coaches, administrators, and officials that having that uniformity was a giant plus, to know that everything looks the same. And to that extent, I'm on board with that as well. While there's someone hosting a region, they're still hosting a CHSAA tournament. And so I believe that it's we are correct in saying that a CHSAA tournament should look the same no matter where it's held. And so adjusting what that looks like, and if it's a 2-mat, 3-mat, what start times, all those different things, those are all variables that are there. But coming up with a uniform system that regionals should look and run this way, so that any official that walks into the building knows this tournament is going to be starting at this time and run this way. I believe there's merit to that, so that we have everything looking the same, because we don't get to the ball arena the next weekend and it's, well, this weight class is going to do it different than this weight class. It's all uniform, and I believe that can extend to the weekend prior, because that is a CHSAA event as opposed to just a regular weekend tournament. So that's the thought process on the uniformity. We heard a lot of positives about it this year. I know it's been something that's been a goal. I would like to bring forward that we go through and are consistent with that, and push out that all of our regions are going to look the same, start the same, et cetera. And I know girls may be a little different just because the weight classes are different, but the 2 girls regions or 3 girls regions, or if we go to 4, they look the same as well. So they may not look the exact same as the boys just because there are different dynamics involved, but however many regions are in the girls section are mirrored with each other. And then returning place, point distribution, some discussion there on what we're looking at doing. There has been in the past, it was brought up this year by a couple of folks, and I don't have the answer to it because I wasn't here when it was developed. The draft, the traditional snake draft, I guess you would call it, that we're all used to, is not used in our regions. Some questions got brought up as to why that was. I don't have the answer to that. So where you would traditionally see you go 1 through 4, and then it's 4 and 5 are placed together, and then it comes back across. And so when I get to 8, then 9 would be below 8, and we start back across. It was not done that way. 8 went back over to the 4 and 5, and so it was for lack of a better term, it was a regular C and then a reverse C, or a U's, I guess you could call it. I'm not sure why that was done, so I wanted to bring that up for discussion as to how we want to snake that draft. And then secondly, the numbers of teams that are involved in that. If we're going to look at adopting some different ideas that may not truly represent what regions have done, because regions are dispersed, do we want to look at adding numbers into that draft, that seeding? Right now it's 8. When you look at 2A and 3A, do we want those to go to 12? 4A has been 12. Girls, are we looking at 8 in each region? Things of that nature. And then 5A this year, we because it was just going to be the hybrid year, we did all of them. We seeded all 5A, just because 5A you're looking at middle of Colorado Springs to Fort Collins, so they're all, it's an I-25 type of region, so we can go through and divide those and have each region set up where they're equal as far as points and returners. Are those things we want to look at? Really just want to bring that up for discussion so we can go through and see, are there changes we want to make there to more evenly distribute the teams? And then the third piece, as we're talking with regions, is girls regions. We had 2 this year. I don't know that we're to the point where we need to add 3, but I also know this year was a hybrid year with teams dropping and this and that because of the situation we're in financially. Do we have more teams come back next year? I think it's easy on the girls side. I think I would propose that we say we're going to use 2, but I wouldn't book hotels yet, just so we can make for sure if we need to add a third or a fourth based on what teams come back next year, we can go through and do that, and have some flexibility once schools declare and we see what our numbers are, kind of like we did this year. We can give a 2 or 3 week notice as to where we're going. We can have sites determined, but schools that are going where, we wait and see exactly how many numbers we have. So those are kind of the discussion points on this that I would kind of throw out to the group and talk through.
Okay, before we get into maybe the longer discussion on the regionals, are there any uniformity concerns or things that you want to point out to Adam that to make sure that are put in those regional director bulletins, and anything that came up this year that you want to make sure is addressed? Okay, well then we'll have Adam keep working on that and expanding that bulletin, and we'll keep working on that piece of it. I don't know if we want to start, maybe we can start by classification and work through and give Adam some guidance on the snaking and the versus the waterfall and whatnot, and how many schools in each classification. We can start with 5A and just say, is there concerns about seating all of those schools in the process. Okay, Adam, it doesn't really sound like there are, so I would go ahead and seed all 5A schools and put them in a region. And
Okay.
I was trying to think back when we started this process as to the snaking and the C versus the reverse C. And I believe that part of the reason why we didn't do the true kind of snaking back and forth is I think that there was concern that there would still be a bunch of disparity by the time you get from 1 all the way back around to 8 in that first region, that you're going to end up kind of with, again, a region where you've got a really strong team and then maybe not as many strong teams. And then on the other side of that, you're going to get to a couple of regions that are really quite stacked. So I think that's why it was. But again, this is our committee, and time has definitely passed since those decisions were made, and we can go in the direction that we want to go. And so I think that's where that came from, but that has been several years ago. If the committee feels strongly one way or another, I don't think there's anything that's set in stone. I do know that in past years where teams have been similar in points, in terms of returning state points, if there was a big geography concern, those teams have been swapped and put into different regions to save on travel when there has not been a big discrepancy between those points. I don't think it's been done on, in say 2A, 3A with the top 4. Those have definitely been pushed, but with 5 through 8, there has been some swapping that's gone on. If one school has,
and we did a little bit of that this year. There was a few of those geographical pieces that we took into account. As far as the snake one way or the other, if you're looking at that number 1 bracket, traditional would have 1, 8, 9, 16. Right now we have 1, 8, 12, 13. So it would be the discussion really is the 8, 12, 13 vastly different than an 8, 9, 16.
I wouldn't think so. So I would think you could go in that snake fashion. But one thing, Travis, you'll remember this, that we used to do a lot at the committee meeting would be the afternoon adjournment, and then we would break off into classifications. And kind of what you were talking about was we would look at all the points in the region and compare the points, and then just swap some teams as needed to balance as much as possible. So again, you'd go your 1 through 4A, 1 through 16 snake draft, but then points below that of those returning teams, and try to balance the regions accordingly that way too, which I thought helped a lot. And I don't know, obviously we didn't do that last year. We've kind of gotten away from that.
Yes, we did do that previously.
And that's something I've got all the points done, so I can send that out to you guys when we are done here. We can put that as a work item to get finished in the next couple of days, so we can get our committee report done and get it out. But those are things we can go through and just have geographic regions, have the top numbers seated appropriately, but then also have the total points listed for everybody in that region. So if there are minor adjustments we need to make, we can do that.
Would there be, I'm going to open up something, that feel free to shoot me down immediately, but is there any reason to make regions so early in the season when we don't know about kids who transfer, move away, move in, where we can keep them even more balanced if we set regions like the week prior to the start of the season? Or is that just too late in the game to let people know who are host sites and whatnot? Because you really might get a truer feel, because what we set right now with the points, it changes a lot throughout those teams.
I I don't know if I love that idea or not, Tyler. For those that are going to be those regional hosts, that does take a lot of planning and preparation ahead of time. For schools that have to make travel arrangements, those are things that they have to budget into their year. If you're Sterling and you're headed over to Delta, that's a paycheck you gotta think about. And so I don't know if I love the idea. I get where you're coming from. We also, part of it is that those are approved through legislative council here in April. I don't know if we have leeway to say, those will be determined on X date, if that's okay as well. I get where you're coming from with some of those kids shifting around and whatnot. Any other thoughts?
Yeah, just a question.
Yeah.
Do you have the leeway to make adjustments once you set, and then come fall, there's some changes? Do you have the leeway to make those adjustments?
I mean, I think there's opportunities if we had a one-off where we need to make a move here or there for various reasons. I don't know that I'm comfortable saying strength of team or this or that is the reason why we're going to make adjustments. That seems a little outside of the box of what we're trying to accomplish. I think if it's a depleted team that only ended up with 3 wrestlers this year because XYZ happened, something like that, maybe there's some adjustments you do there just to be able to help get closer to full brackets at certain places. I think that's more in line with what we'll be discussing potentially. But that'd be really the only kind of situation where I could see something like that going on, minus the girls' side, which I do think is going to be it's just a giant question mark right now as to what next year looks like, knowing teams are going to be coming back in next year potentially.
I can just say that whatever that kind of process, it does give me pause. I think there's something to having those regionals published. Teams know what they're facing. They build schedules off of those regions. And if it's a constantly moving piece, that could be, there may be unintended consequences there that we're not seeing.
And the other piece that I would add to that too is we had 2 regions that, even though these were set in May, still didn't have a host declared in January. And to think that we can now turn around every region and get a host declared in 2 weeks and everything set up. Recent history tells me that may not be the case because 8 or 9 months wasn't enough time. So I've got some pretty grave concerns there as well.
Yeah, totally understand. And that makes sense. We do build our schedule based off of regional opponents and whatnot. And so, yeah, I think it is good to get it set. Just thought it would be a good question.
Mm-hmm.
Just get the brains flowing.
Thanks for putting Adam and I on the spot. We appreciate that. We get that mental exercise.
You're welcome. Hey, I'll back you up though, since you went through 5A. I think I would speak for coaches. Again, I know Travis has a different standpoint as an AD, but for coaches, I would like to see 4A go to an all-seeded classification as well. But I know we're a little bit more spread out, and it continues to get spread out on the way down. But if we're working through the classes, I think 4A would like to join that.
I guess if we're going to go to a seeded state tournament all the way, I think you have to do that with the regionals. But I know for 2 and 3A where we're so spread out, can the seeding be different for 2 and 3A at the state tournament than it is for 4A, 5A? If their regionals are going to be, if you got all those tough kids or tough teams spread out, and 2A, 3A where you're only doing the top 8.
So I can't seed differently by classification at the state level. We could design the regionals a little bit differently. So we could still have, our 4 regions. Let's take 2A for example. We could have those, and instead of, we could draw a line down the middle, whatever it is, and we're going to seed this half into these 2 and seed this half into these 2, as opposed to doing the snake all the way down. There's some things we could do there to take in the geographic concerns, but still get a more accurately seeded region. Those are some things we could potentially look at. But as far as different criteria for different classifications once they get to state. We've got issues there.
Yeah.
I'm gonna jump in and say, when we get to 8.0, that's gonna start driving some discussions as well. And so I think, Matt, some of the things you're talking about may be in flux when we get to talking about agenda item 8.0 as well. And so I think good things to keep in the back of our mind for next year. Definitely want to try and get back to normal as much as possible. While we know we don't have a perfect system, I think we've got some bigger hurdles coming as well that are probably going to affect all of these conversations that we're going to have. So I would keep those things in the back of your mind, Matt, because we will need to address some of those moving forward. Personally, I feel like that the snaking that we've done at least has helped mitigate those problems to some degree. While we still do see some regionals that are stronger than others, I don't know if we're ever going to be able to get away from that. At least the pieces that we've done have helped to balance that. I don't think I could speak to the 4A piece for the 12 or the 16 or all of them, however many we do there, because I know we do have a little bit more geography that pops up. And unfortunately for 4A, it's those same schools that have those geography issues time in and time out. And so I don't know if it's fair to them to hit them again, so to speak. Whereas with 3A and 2A, again, we all have geography issues, but we all seem to spread the love there a little bit too. And we don't all always get hit over and over again, except for maybe Matt, who's got to travel to everything. But I would, those ADs that affects or coaches, definitely have some feedback on 4A and what you think.
I mean, I'll take off my CHSAA hat and put on my former AD hat from one of those schools that has to travel. And I don't want to speak for any of those guys, but if I'm coming to the Front Range, if it's Colorado Springs or Denver, it makes no difference as far as what region I'm going to. If I'm already driving 5 hours, 30 more minutes in the grand scheme of things isn't going to blow the budget necessarily. While I don't want my kids on the bus any longer than they have to be, I could see where, and we can reach out to those guys, but I could see where if I'm already traveling, does it make a difference if I'm going to North Denver versus South Denver versus Colorado Springs? Probably not a ton. And those are also, as we discussed, if those are things that we want to go through and make slight adjustments because of geography, then that's an option as well. Where I don't want to see it is to become a Denver-centric situation where those schools are always coming to Denver only. And so if it's a Pueblo school that has earned the right to host that region, that they're out of the mix because that's too far for somebody from the Grand Junction area to travel to, where they would prefer to travel to Denver. I don't want it to become something where certain regions are not welcomed because of their location due to doing just the true split. That would be my concern. But at the end, if we're driving somewhere, an extra few miles here and there is not going to make a major impact.
Adam, can you refresh my memory? How many schools did we place for 4A?
This past year, 4A was 12.
I think we went 16.
It was 12.
Oh, it was 12?
Yeah.
A couple years ago, we voted that into B16. We should be 16. Starting now, I guess.
Okay. 12 was because I just copied what was there from the previous year. So 12 is what I had notes on. So I did 12 there. And then let's see. So it was 12 for 4A, 3A was 8, and 2A was 8.
Okay. So 8 and 2A, 8, 3A, 12, 4A, and then 5A went all this year, right?
Yep.
So
I could see some merit into going, if we didn't go everyone for 4A, I could easily see some merit into going to 16, 12, and 12 for the other classifications.
yeah, I'd like to see at least at minimum 16. And then 3A and 2A, are you guys good going to 12? Matt, would that be good? Or would you like to see more?
Well, it's all going to come down to travel time, I think, with the schools and stuff. I don't have a problem with it because we're used to it. And I mean, if we have to travel, we have to travel. We'll get it done. But I can't speak for people that are scattered all over the place.
Yeah. Yeah, it just becomes such a bigger issue at 3A and 2A. You know, it's also hard when you have all of that travel for your regional hosts to generate income as well. If you got them a little bit more centrally located, then you can get more people there, more parents can see, more grandparents can see. It's just that you get more spectators and it's a better event, I think. I don't think 2A, 3A probably would have any issues going to 12 at this point, and we could see how that plays out and if that helps the distribution a little bit.
And we can still, I mean, if needed, when we're placing, if we wanted to put that, we're going to place 12, but 9 through 12 can also have a geographic component to it. So if 12 and 11 can switch spots, if it means one of you is not having to drive 6 hours and the other one can only drive an hour, to me that only makes sense to say, those final 4 that are placed can be moved a spot based on geography, something along those lines. So we'll keep 1 through 8 true, and then 9 through 12 make an adjustment for geography, since that would be the new piece from what we've been doing. We can make those adjustments for those guys based on geography. I shouldn't, if my current region for geographic purposes is right where I am, but I'm up a spot, so I've got to drive across the state, and it seems like it would make more sense to balance that out from a geographic standpoint.
Like, is this an actionable item? Do we need a motion and a vote to move these things?
If we're gonna make the changes, then yeah, there'll be action items to go through and set those up. So I think we need to have an action item for how we want to snake these things, and then also for each classification, if we're going to do all 16, 12, 12, and then Sparky for girls, I was thinking 8 in each region. But I don't know if there's merit to it for 12. I'm going to let you speak to that one as well.
It'll be next year. It'll change so much that you could do 8 because
Okay.
the teams will break up, and you'll get new teams coming in, and so it's going to be difficult. So we'll just do the best we can. Just like this year, it was difficult. Was there a balance in region as far as tough teams? But that's you can't. You're never going to be perfect. So we do the best we can, and I like the idea regionally. We have to consider Pueblo, Fort Collins as the girls expand. It won't be just a Denver-centric concept like you were saying earlier. We have some teams spread out. So, 8 will be fine.
Okay. So I guess the 2 different motions would need to be, one for how we want to snake it, and then second would be for 5A to be all, and then go 16, 12, 12, 8.
Okay, so I would make a motion to do a true snake in your regional seating. So 1 through 4, and then 4 goes down to 5, 5 back to 8, down to 9, over to 16. And then I would make a motion that girls is at 8, 2A will go to 12, 3A would move to 12, 4A would move to 16, and 5A remains at all for number of teams seated.
Okay, let's go ahead and take these one at a time. Is there a second for the snake motion?
Sorry.
No, you're good, Tyler.
I second the snake motion.
Okay. Sam, do you have that?
I do
motion
have it
from
written
Tyler?
down.
Adam's got it.
Yep.
Okay.
So motion by Tyler, second by Blue.
Blue. Okay. I guess all those in favor, can you just give us a quick thumbs up?
Rodney, I can't see. Are you in favor?
Put your thumb up by your forehead there, Rodney.
He's shaking his head. Yes.
All right.
Okay.
Larry's thumbs up. We're gonna say Pat's a thumbs up too.
Got them all. Thank you.
Sorry,
All right,
my lead custodian was in my office asking me a question. Sorry. That's why I was shaking my head.
And then the second motion to have 5A as all teams distributed, 16 for 4A, 12 for 3A, 12 for 2A, and 8 for girls. Do I have a second for that motion?
I'll second that.
Good.
Got it. Thanks, Marky.
Again, all those in favor? Give us a thumbs up.
Got them. Thank you.
Okay. Adam, was there anything else as far as the girls' regions that you wanted us to discuss, or was it just the number of teams?
It was number of teams, and I think we'll stay with 2 right now, and we'll see what our numbers look like and make adjustments. We'll call the committee together if we need to make adjustments accordingly.
Okay. Sounds good. Then we'll move on to agenda item 8.0. This will be an interesting discussion point, I think, for a year or two to come. But Adam is going to clue us in on some of the challenges that he's facing with the Pepsi Center and with our state format. Before we do that, would like to just emphasize that, again, next year, looking to return to normal, get back to the Pepsi Center, get back to the season that we've seen. But there are some challenges heading our way with basically with sustainability of our current state format. And so that's something that we're trying to be proactive on and see if we can come up with some good solutions before we get ourselves into a bad situation and have to make decisions in a quick manner. So for that, I'll turn it over to Adam.
Yeah, thanks, Travis. Our current situation when we are using Ball Arena, Pepsi Center, whatever we're going to call it, it's a great venue, and our tournament is awesome the way it's run there. We are slowly but surely being nickeled and dimed out of the venue. As minimum wage continues to increase at both the state level and or the national level, depending on what gets passed where, our costs are only going up to the point of Thursday and Friday in that facility are almost to the point where it's not sustainable. To give you an example, that venue holds, with our setup, roughly 15,800 people. Our session 1 on Thursday, the last 2 years has averaged 2,400 people total in that session 1. Session 2 has averaged 2,750. So we're talking, if you combine both of those sessions together, we're at 6,000 people roughly in a 15,000 seat arena. We're paying for staffing and all those different things for a 15,000 seat arena to have 6,000 people in it. That's not a sustainable course that we're on right now. When you move to Friday, the numbers start to look a little bit better. We're at 5,100 roughly is our average for session number 3. Again, out of a 15,000 seat arena, we're not there. And then when you go to session number 4, our numbers creep up to about a 7,200 average. So we're getting close there on that session 4, but we've been in there all day long. And so all day long, we haven't been close to being able to fill it, and we're paying those people that are in there all day long. When I get to Saturday, our Saturday morning sessions actually draw less than our Friday evening session. We're at 4,300 on average. And then obviously Saturday nights where our larger numbers come in. But you may be shocked to see that our actual numbers for Saturday evening over the last 2 years, it's 9,675 is our average. So we're basically 9,700 people in a 15,000 seat arena is where we're at. And now there's and those are sold tickets. We have comps and we have the seating for our athletes and coaches and things like that in there. But as far as the tickets that are sold, we're not keeping up with what the venue seats and what the venue costs us. So as Travis said, not an action item, but some things we need to start discussing and understanding that if we don't start making some accommodations to where we're at, we're going to have an issue that's on our hands and we have to make a quick decision. And I don't want us to be there. I want us to be proactive in looking at how do we make changes to the structure of the tournament? How do we, as far as downtime, because while we may be taking a 90-minute break in the building before the next session starts, all those ushers and everyone else are still on the clock sitting there waiting for us to get going again. And so do we make adjustments to our overall schedule? Do we need to think outside of the box and make some decisions on how the actual tournament is run itself and what rounds are actually hosted at that venue versus other venues that come at a much less price? So there's just some different things there that I want us to be cognizant of, have a discussion around. Again, nothing's off the table, nothing's on the table. It is simply, we need to start really kind of thinking outside the box and dreaming big on how do we grow the tournament, not lose the appeal that it has, but also understand that it comes at a cost, and it's the trajectory is one that we've only got a couple years left of doing this, and it's not going to be a viable option for us anymore. So I hate to be the bearer of bad news, and I know this has been brought up before, but the time is now, because we know that it's going to be an increased cost this year just to get back there, because minimum wage has changed since we were there 2 years ago. And so our costs are only going to continue to rise. And I don't want us to just bury our head in the sands and hope it gets better, because it's not going to. And so I just want us to be aware, have some discussion, and see what we want to do. And maybe this is something we just talk about for the next year, and then we come together next year and start building out that plan. But I want it to be on our radar. I want it to be addressed. I want it to be something that's in the minutes that we officially have started discussing. How do we make this tournament sustainable? So with that, I'll kind of just throw it out there to the group to kind of let's start talking through what that looks like, options, et cetera. But again, just want it to be something that we all are aware of.
Can you exactly, I mean, how much money are we talking? I mean, is it 50,000 each day, more?
Oh, it's more. It's six figures.
Well, I mean, more. You're already paying like 120 or 115 a day.
Right.
I mean, if we knew a number, we could probably go out and fundraise whatever we need to keep it there, because the wrestling community, I mean, wants it at the Pepsi Center, and they want 16-minute brackets. And I mean, if Ray can raise 350,000 to build a wrestling room in a couple of months, the whole wrestling community statewide would have no problem raising, 1 or 2 days worth of money for the Pepsi Center is what I think could happen. And I mean, if we had to, we could go down to Friday, Saturday. I mean, I'm glad we're thinking about this far in advance.
Yeah, I think Matt's saying basically the Pepsi Center is kind of a sacred cow for the wrestling community.
Sure.
And if it is, then have we investigated corporate sponsorships or anything like that, where we can get someone to, and I don't know who would lead that. That'd be the problem with that. I don't know that that's in Adam's job description to go out and hustle money for wrestling. But I mean, when you start touching the sacred cow, I think people might be willing to do what Matt was saying, that we look at this in a little different, light.
Yeah. The piece that we're looking for is that sustainability piece with the sponsorships and the fundraising and those things. That is a constant battle. And if you have a pandemic year, you just never know you're going to be able to come back to that person and they're going to be able to help you. And then we're in a position where we're stuck. And so that's, I think, what they're trying to avoid is being in that position. I think everybody understands that what the Pepsi Center means to wrestling and the event that has been built there. I think, again, Adam's just looking for discussions on how to maybe make it even more sustainable so that it can last longer there. I don't think there's any thought of trying to move finals or any of those things out of there. It's just, how can we, are there things we can do to make it more sustainable within the, again, within the kind of the parameters that we've been, maybe the funding parameters that we have.
And Matt, to kind of your question, well, this is kind of the 30,000 foot view. Just from 19 to 20, it was a $27,000 increase in the facility, and that wasn't with some extreme, rise in minimum wage and all those different things. That was just your cost of living type stuff that's going to increase every year. When we start talking 4 years of that continuing, and or any more increases in the minimum wage, et cetera, we're going to talk 4 years from now, it's an extra $100,000 onto the cost. And I think we can all agree that unless we start charging $100 a ticket, that's not going to be a sustainable trajectory for us. And so that's really where it's at. It's just seeing that's increasing year over year, and we know there's more of that coming. That's where we just have to be proactive to a certain extent and look at what our options are. And like Matt said, is Thursday something we need? Can we make that a Friday, Saturday tournament? If we know Thursday's not really bringing in the large crowds, I mean, that's where I'm at. It's just, we need to start thinking, what kind of adjustments can we make to help offset costs, but also still have the full experience. And I'm not going to sit here and pretend I have all the answers either. That's why I'm bringing it to you guys. I think we have a year to go through and discuss and think where this needs to go. But the path we're on is not going to be one that keeps us there for a real long time.
Adam, have you already investigated or put out feelers for a venue that could hold 9,000 people?
We're having State Spirit there right now. The World Arena would be an option. It would be, I think they can hold like 8,500 roughly. So it'd be right there. We would have demand for tickets.
Yep.
And I'm not by any stretch proposing that we need to go there. So I want to make that abundantly clear. I'm not proposing any changes, but when you start asking, are there venues? Yes, there are. And they've worked with us the last 2 weekends to have basketball down there, and now State Spirit is there. So yes, there are venues. The Pepsi Center is not the only venue that can hold the amount of people we need it to hold. If we were having 12 to 13,000 people there every session, obviously the Pepsi Center is the way to go, and we don't have another venue like that. But when our numbers show that we're not getting close to that 15,000 number, other venues become possibilities at a certain point. Now, and I don't know what their rental costs are there. I haven't done any of that research. I can't tell you that comparing venue A to venue B is a X amount of savings. We're not even to that level yet. It's just simply putting it out there so we know we've got work to do. One of the options that you see in other states, they've gone to a regional and then a sectional format and then your state, so that when you get to state, it's more of your semifinals, or you could go, semifinals and place matches, things like that, and finals. I mean, there's some options there where you could do that. You could have your sectionals in smaller arenas, kind of like what we were in Pueblo, and you could go UNC and different places that have that size venue where we could host a sectional event where you got to qualify out of regionals, maybe more qualify out of regionals. It's 6 out of regionals instead of 4. And then you go to a sectional event that's a larger event, but it is scaled down venue that doesn't have the same costs associated with it, to then arrive at the Pepsi Center the following weekend for a Friday, Saturday tournament. I mean, those are all the things that are out there that other states use that we're starting to investigate and see what options might be there at work for us. I mean, while we're going to save money on the Pepsi Center, we've also now included a second weekend of travel for schools. So I recognize that. So there's a piece there as well that we need to work through. But those are kind of some of the things that I want us to kind of think through, is to save the Pepsi Center feel for Friday and Saturday. What does it need to look like before we get there?
And like committee members have already spoken to, this is going to be a hot topic. There's, the Pepsi Center is staked in tradition. What we want people to understand is this is not the sky is falling situation. This honestly is an opportunity for us to look at that state tournament and see if there's a way we can make it even better, to make it more sustainable so that we can continue this model or whatever model we come up with, for more years to come, because these kinds of challenges are going to continue to knock on our door. And I think it's a good time for us to look at how can we make it even stronger, and it can keep weathering time.
I think it's probably really good to continue to be proactive. And I like some of the stuff we're discussing, but I think for this year, especially if we're kind of looking at something that it could be the last chance, but really advertising, making it public knowledge that our state tournament is in danger of changing its format, that our state tournament's in danger of possibly losing a venue, and see if we don't get more people in those seats. If we don't get up to 4,000 to 5,000 people on Thursday and more people on Friday and Saturday, and, kind of a call to action to our wrestling community, show up and support these guys and buy a ticket.
And I certainly don't want to attach any negativity to the tournament. Our goal is to not make any changes and to be able to keep moving forward. So I don't want to have there be any kind of negative connotation to what we're doing. But yes, we need to figure out are there changes we can make, changes that can save time, that can save the downtimes, those kind of things. We're going to look at every penny we can cut. And we started doing that last year, and we'll take a deep dive into that this year. I've already got my meeting set with them coming up, so we're already working on what next February is going to look like. So we can make every cut we possibly can there, and so that I'm good with next year. And I don't want to say it's a next year's the last year kind of situation. I want just to be public that we're going to eventually get priced out of the venue in our current model.
And I don't want to be either. Yeah, I just want to educate people, though. Educate our wrestling community on, hey, it's important that you show up there and you're not streaming it on an FHS for the whole weekend because it's saving you $1. Like, get out there and get to the Pepsi Center, and if it's important to us, then you need to show up and show us it's important to us, or we're going to be making significant changes. So yeah, I don't know, just some education for our folks, because I think, like Matt said, you might see a huge jump in attendance and, a spike in revenue, maybe. I don't know.
You 4A, 5A guys just need your fans to follow like they do in 2 and 3A.
I just put them in purple, man. They'll show up. They'll take a whole section.
And Tyler, I think that's a great thing we can talk to our communities about. But there's always going to be something that could come up. We could have a snowstorm like we did, a week ago. If that had happened several days earlier, that would have paralyzed the amount of people that could come there. And if we still have to pay the bill, that could drastically hit our attendance. And so we have to be cognizant of those things as well. And, we can only put the cry out for help so many times before people stop, that they stop hearing it. So, well, I think those are all good things that we can do, and we can help, maybe help keep us there. I don't know that it makes that conversation go away for the future. And that's why we want to act while we have time.
Realistically, Adam said it's a 15 to 16,000 seat venue, and we're only getting 9,000, close to 10,000. So you're going to have to increase your spectators big time.
Well, and the toughest thing is, right now you have to consider probably the biggest piece of this is completely out of our control, because the Pepsi, or whatever you call it now, right? They are the people that are raising the fees on us. There's nothing we can do about that. And with the minimum wage going up too, it's tough because we're trying to plan and consider what other people might do. It's a tough spot to be in.
and I don't want, just to be clear here, I don't want to necessarily throw the folks at Ball Arena completely under the bus here on what's going on, because a lot of this stuff is just beyond their control. Just looking at a 2-year comparison, the actual rent that they charge us for the facility didn't change, but the things that they have to subcontract out for security and all those different things, those are where the changes really are occurring. And that's not their doing either. That is simply to have the amount of people that are required to be there and what they have to pay them based on what the state and national numbers are saying. That's where the costs are going up, and that's not going to change. So just so that we're clear on where they land in this, I don't feel as though they're sitting there gouging us every year and raising prices, this and that. It's just, that's the cost of, I mean, you guys all see it with paying your hourly workers and things like that for your events at the school. Costs are going up, and so that's where we land on some of those.
You know, and I don't think this is a scenario where we necessarily want to pass those costs on to our parents. You know, one option would be to look at the ticket prices, but you know, that I know CHSAA has worked very hard over the years in all sports to keep those at a reasonable rate so that we're not passing on those costs to our communities. So that, you know, and the Pepsi Center, they give us a prime weekend during basketball, hockey. You know, they could put a concert in there. They could make, you know, put an event in there that makes them a lot more money than what we bring in. So they are, I think they are trying to be good stewards of the state and help us. But like Adam said, there's just things that are beyond their control as well.
So for next year, you are planning on 16-man brackets being at the Pepsi
next year will be, it'll look the exact same. The only changes you may have next year is how we seed it potentially, and using the track system and those things. Those would be the only difference you may see. But
and the girls will be coming in, eating up some of that slack time in between the rounds with.
Yes, and one of the things we've looked at is with 10 mats in there, we would just move. So let's say it's Thursday morning, so it's 2A and 3A are in there. I don't know where girls would fit, but let's say they're in there with you guys. They would just take 2 middle mats, and then we'd have 4 mats for the 4A and 5A because they've got the more weight classes. So we can adjust the schedule slightly to be able to make sure they're in there and they're a part of it. Just some of those sessions where it has traditionally been 2 classifications would be 3. And then when we go to finals, it would just be 5 classifications instead of 4. We'd have five mats out instead of 4. So I do believe that transition will be fairly easy for us to get in there and not have any major issues and welcome them as a part of the state wrestling tournament.
You will see attendance go up a little too, because you'll see some people who grandma and grandpa want to come see their new wrestlers. So, you know, it'll be interesting to see the numbers. I mean, it's not going to be drastic, but you're going to see a little bit better attendance on Thursday when you roll the girls in.
And our goal this year was to have them in at the same time as the guys. Just that the timing of how we had to do things and the hoops we had to jump through, it just wasn't going to be possible to be able to, under the myriad of limitations we had this year, it wasn't possible to work them in and have a single day tournament with 3 classifications going with the limited number of mats and this and that. It didn't work. That was the original plan. If you saw the original schedule we had built, and then it just became more and more obvious we're not going to be able to accomplish that and have team, unless we get there at 5 a.m. and get out of there at 11 o'clock at night. That was the only way I could make it work. And that didn't seem reasonable. So we had to switch that to the Thursday, but going forward, they would be integrated into the state championship.
I thought it worked really well. I mean, I thought it, especially in the situation we were, I thought it worked really well.
But yeah, man, as far as this year, it shouldn't look any different than normal. Other than there'll be a new classification in there modified into our schedule, and then potentially based on what we decide to do with how seeding is done, those would be your only changes you would see to the state tournament this year. Minus, I mean, there may be some adjustments to the break times that we have, those links maybe get shortened. If I'm taking a 90-minute break, I'm still paying all those guys to sit there for 90 minutes. Can we make that 60 minutes or 45 minutes and cut down on some of those things just to get us out of there earlier so that we can reduce some of our costs, or start a little bit later to reduce cost? Those are some of the things that I can work through just to, again, as we're trying to make cuts that aren't really that noticeable. Those are the areas that I can attack first on when is our downtime to get rid of some of that pay.
Just speaking as a coach, just remember, we got to go somewhere and eat and try to get back in that amount of time too.
Yep.
It's difficult, but I mean, if we have to, we can make it happen.
Well, a lot of our downtime is when it's classifications changing. And so what can we do to limit some of that downtime? But yeah, we're gonna need to look at all those just to see what we can do to shave off some time, because shaving off time is going to shave off some dollars. So those are the changes you'll see this year. And then what we're talking about is going forward after that. Are there changes we need to do? And that's just going to be an open dialogue that we need to have, and just continue that conversation as we move forward.
Do you have dates? Do you have dates for next year's regional and state already, or no?
Yeah, hang on. I can go pull those up for you.
Yeah, those are on the calendar posted on CHSAA.
Oh,
We
yeah.
have next
Okay.
year's calendar up.
Sorry.
No, you're good. I had to go look too, Tyler.
So right now, I've got it as regionals will be right before you take your wife out for Valentine's. You would have the 12th and 13th would be your regionals, and then state would be the 18th through the 20th. And I believe all those dates to be correct for next year. We'll do some double checking on that since everything's kind of gone upside down this year, but I believe those are the correct dates.
Well, thank you.
Okay, well, I think we've done a good job at least putting it out there of what hurdles we have in our future, and we'll continue to develop plans and do everything we can to make this sustainable.
All right. Thanks for bringing those issues to our attention, Adam. And I know it's a lightning rod for discussion, but I'm glad we have some time to look at things and move forward in an intentional manner. 9.0, girls wrestling discussion. Obviously, we've got, we're going into our second year of sanctioning, and we want to be mindful of how that sport is progressing. So I think, again, Adam has some thoughts here he would like to share with the group.
Yeah, really, I just wanted to celebrate that we were able to get it officially underneath the CHSAA umbrella, and that we were able to do the championship this year. I know it was different than what we all envisioned for year one of the championship for girls wrestling to be, but again, celebrate the fact that we have champions and it's official. I know Rob brought out some things earlier this morning from the official side, so we'll need to make sure we make that a point of emphasis for next year. Really, I just wanted to open it up for just discussion. I know Sparky's kind of spoke a couple times about it, but kind of give our girls coach here an opportunity to speak and share, and if there's anything we need to work on and build on as we move forward. I wanted just to have a set piece on the agenda to focus in on our newest members of the CHSAA Association.
I'll second Sparky's comment from earlier that I thought the Thursday actually ended up being a really nice showcase for our young ladies. I thought that was a great day, and to have them all under one roof and to give them that kind of event, I think was a great way to ring in that first state championship for them. It was nicely done.
And I think as you start thinking about state and regional events, especially state, a lot of schools don't have dedicated girls coaches. And so you're going to have to think about, and there's no easy answer there. And so when you have, we just need to post it as soon as possible so that they can start planning, okay, who's going to coach the girls? Because, we may be in different places. If we're with 4A, 5A, then that's then the 2A, 3A coaches are with their boys. And so we just have to think about, once we decide where the girls fit in this state tournament, we just have to publish that as soon as possible so everybody can make plans. And then the uniform things, that's an unfortunate part that I was at only girls events this year. And I saw no issues. I saw no issues with hair and stuff like that. And so I think we need to emphasize to our athletic directors and coaches, spend the money on their uniforms, get girl cut uniforms. It's ridiculous to see girls wrestling in boys uniforms. That's got to be communicated to our athletic directors and coaches that, spend your $50 or whatever and get girls, outfitted the way they're supposed to. And I don't know how to do that. That's frustrating to me.
Mm-hmm.
Because, we shouldn't put our kids in that situation. That's unacceptable.
Any other thoughts or comments? Okay. We'll move on to item 10.0, recommendations for committee members. Looking at the list, trying to see, looks like we have 3 people that this is their last year. Am I reading that correct, Adam or Sam?
Yeah, so this is the time we wanted to spend a few minutes and say thank you to Larry, Rodney, and Tyler for your time and commitment on this committee. I know I joined in halfway through, but thank you guys for being ones that can lean on and count on to answer the difficult questions and to help us stay focused on continuing forward. I also actually got an email during this meeting from Randall Palmer, who's also on the committee, that he will need to recuse himself from the committee. He's been a principal at a school. They've now decided to join 2 high schools into one. And so he's got a lot on his plate all of a sudden, trying to merge 2 schools together to open up in August. So he asked that he'd be taken off the committee just because he can't put the time and effort into it that he needs to. So Larry, Rodney, Tyler, Randall, if you're watching or listening, thank you guys. Appreciate your help and leadership.
I'd second that. It's fantastic to have trusted voices in the room that can help lead our sport in a positive direction. So you guys have really been excellent committee members, and we appreciate all of your time and dedication.
So with that, if you any of you guys or anybody that's watching has names of guys that would be willing to serve on this committee, that can come in with a global viewpoint, looking out for 360 schools and what's best for the sport overall as we move forward, just send those names to me, and we can begin slowly but surely building out how we're going to replace these 4 guys and move forward from there.
Does anybody else have anything for the good of the order before we adjourn?
No, I'll throw out a thank you to you, Travis and Adam, for making sure that we had that state tournament. I know there was a lot of question marks, and I know you guys worked incredibly hard. So thank you so much for just making sure that regionals and state happened. And I don't know, I mean, right up to the very moment prior to state and getting word about COVID testing and everything else, it was just a huge question mark and stressful. And once we got to do it, I mean, it was a great event and it looked nice and our kids felt celebrated and people were happy. And so thank you guys for all the work to make sure the season happened and happened in a way that we can be proud of.
Yeah, and I'll emphasize that. Thank you very much for the work to, get all that done. You had to put brackets together, you had to put venues together. And yet, that was able to celebrate the wrestling community, and that was a great job. And thank you guys for your service to the wrestling community, Rodney, Larry, and Tyler.
Thank you. It was a privilege and an honor.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate it.
All right, with that, I will go ahead and adjourn the meeting. And Be watching your emails for some of those things that we've been discussing to come out, and we'll start collecting some feedback for those issues moving forward. Thank you all for your time. Again, thank you, Adam. Thank you, Sam. We're looking forward to maybe a little more normalcy next year. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks,
All right,
everybody.
thank you, guys.
Thank you.